I didn't expect the phone to ring that early. It was a Thursday, ordinary, messy, hours. By 7:30 a.m., the kitchen was loud with cereal bowls, the clatter of lunch boxes, the soft thunder of tiny shoes on tile. I was tying Daniel's laces while Lily searched for the sweater she insisted had the good pockets. The house smelled like toast and coffee and the lemon cleaner I'd swiped across the counter with more optimism than precision. And then the phone sliced through everything, sharp, insistent, a bright needle through fabric. An unfamiliar area code glowed on the screen. For a second I just watched it blink. Then I answered. "Hello," I said, cautious, pressing the phone between my shoulder and my ear while I rescued a grape escaping Lily's snack bag. A breath. Then a voice I knew better than my own. "Mark? It's me. Nora." I straightened. "Hey, what's wrong?" She worked for a small marketing firm that planted her in hotels more nights than I liked to admit. I worked from home and kept the daily machinery turning, kids, meals, bills, the soft architecture of a life. Our rhythms were different, but they meshed. We had made them mesh. Or so I believed. Her voice was tight but steady. "My purse was stolen last night, in the hotel lobby. I went down to get a newspaper and it's gone. I need you to cancel our credit cards. Right away." Daniel tugged my sleeve. Lily asked if I could braid her hair like Aunt Mia. I walked into the hallway where the sound thinned. "Stolen? In the lobby? Are you okay? Did you talk to security? The police?" I let the hotel know. "I spoke with Joy, my boss, well, Ms. Keaton, and she's arranging new company Amex cards to be overnight. She'll wire me enough to manage until they arrive. But please cancel everything. Today. Now." "You're always careful," I said, not accusing, not yet, just noting how wrong it sounded against what I knew of her. "What exactly happened?" "I got a headline and went to grab more reading material," she said, like she was choosing each word with tweezers. I set my purse on the cashier's counter, turned around for a second, and when I came back, it was gone. The cashier was with someone else. She didn't see. My driver's license was in there, too. The hotel is sending staff to check the dumpsters in case it was tossed. If they don't find it, I'll have to take a taxi to today's meeting. I pinched the bridge of my nose. "All right. I'll cancel them. You don't worry about that." "I'm sorry," she whispered. "It's my fault. There was maybe $1,200 in the wallet. We can replace the cards slowly. My makeup's in the room, so I'll be fine for the presentation. How are the kids? I miss you all." I looked back toward the kitchen. Lily had found her sweater. Daniel had stopped asking about the laces and started telling the dog that 7-year-olds could do things, basically like adults. I felt a pang, of tenderness, of something unnamed, something already curling at the edges of the day. "They're good," I said. "We all miss you, too." After I hung up, I did what she'd asked. I called every card company, navigated the maze of menus, spelled our street name for the third time to a man who kept hearing Briar when I said bridge. I watched the kids eat, wiped milk from a chin, located a permission slip stranded under the microwave. I watched the clock, too, because there's a particular kind of dread that only grows when it has minutes to feed on. Life moved forward. It always does. It moved for about 6 weeks. And then, on a quiet afternoon while I was hunting for our home insurance policy in the file cabinet we both pretended was organized, I found a slim folder wedged where it shouldn't be. The label had her handwriting, thin, neat, as if trying not to disturb the space it occupied. Fidelity Investments. Nora had a separate account, money from the inheritance she received after her parents died in that sudden, terrible accident 3 years ago. I had always respected the clean wall around it. Her grief was hers. Her inheritance was hers. The number in my mind was rough, 350,000, give or take. I didn't open the folder to snoop, I opened it because it was between me and the insurance policy, and because curiosity, once awake, can be a feral animal. The statements were orderly. Quietly impressive. The fund had grown to over 400,000. I felt something like pride bloom, she had shepherded it well. Then I saw it. A withdrawal. $3,000. Dated about 6 weeks earlier, right after the hotel call. Not from the main fund, but from the money market attached to it. Attached to the withdrawal was a check number. A payee. A local jewelry store. I stared. Jewelry. $3,000. 2 days after her purse was stolen. I tried to knit the facts. She hadn't mentioned a gift for anyone. Nora wasn't someone who bought her brother expensive surprises out of nowhere. And she certainly hadn't bought anything for me, there would have been. A box, a smiley little ceremony, her teasing me to guess. There had been none of that. The thought arrived in me like a stone dropped down a well. Rings. I turned to the computer and found the store's site. A tasteful banner, heavy fonts implying longevity, trust. I wrote down the number, sat there with the pen hovering over the yellow legal pad as though the ink might lift answers up on its own. Then I called. Good afternoon, a woman said, warm, competent. Astor and Finch Jewelers. How may I help you? I gave my name. I mentioned a check dated 6 weeks ago. I said we'd run into a small issue and wanted to know about the warranty. Of course, she said, keys clicking. Let me pull the order. A beat. Then, yes. I remember this one. Your wife was very upset. She said her wedding and engagement rings were stolen, and she needed replacements. Challenging to match within her budget, but we found something she liked. She left a company credit card as collateral and sent a check later. What seems to be the problem? Is a stone loose? For a breath, the world tilted. I could hear my own silence. My mind was suddenly a white corridor, all doors at once. Stolen wedding rings. Replacements. She had never said she'd lost her rings. She had said, only, the purse. The newspaper. The cashier. The dumpsters. The taxi. She had said our day's script, and I had spoken my lines. I found a voice. Let me speak with her and I'll call you back. I hung up. I didn't accuse her when she got home that night. I didn't ask to see her hand because I already knew, she always wore her rings at home. She wore them now, gleaming like nothing at all had happened. If she had lost them, why hadn't she told me? Why pay for near replicas, and keep the story of the purse theft clean of that one horrible note? Why tell me the cashier story when the woman at the jewelry store remembered someone trembling in front of a velvet tray, bracing herself against a counter as if the truth in her mouth weighed too much to say? I told myself there were other explanations. Always the other explanations, like spare keys in a dish by the door, cheap, available, a little bit bent. And yet. I called the hotel. Records? I asked. From that night. A report about a theft filed by my wife. They faxed it over within the hour. The machine on my desk coughed out thin, hot paper that curled at the corners as if shy about what it carried. I read it twice before the shape of the words stopped shifting. The statement was composed by Nora. Signed. It said her purse had been stolen, while she was dancing in the hall. She'd left it at the booth, and when she returned, it was gone. The note added, almost apologetically, that she hesitated to involve the police. Dancing. Not the cashier. Not the newspaper. Not the quiet late-night lobby. Music. A booth. A dance floor. The purse on the bench where one leaves things, trusting a circle of friends, the quick steps back to someone's smile. a particular thought walked into my mind and sat down, as if it had always had a chair waiting. If she had taken off her rings, if she had slipped them into the purse to appear unmarried, why? For what? And with whom? I tell myself, and told myself then, that there are many reasons someone might take off a ring. Lotion. A rash. A snag. A joke. A dare. But the mind is a hunter once it has a scent. It doesn't easily let go. If she had been hiding, that night had already altered its own story. The rings were gone. Or not gone, replaced. The theft was real enough, perhaps. But the object stolen had a different weight now, a different shine. I told myself to breathe. She had another trip coming up in a few days. She always did, once a month, sometimes more, 2 or 3 nights in other cities with identical hotel carpets and the same little card that says your linens will be replaced only upon request to save the earth. I wanted to know, not to imagine. I wanted to stop feeding my fear like a stray cat and see it clearly, why it was scratched, why it stared. If there were condoms, they wouldn't be in the house. Not in the glove compartment of the family car. Not in a closet box next to tax returns. She would keep them close to where her other traveling things lived, work papers, laptop, those laminated presentation materials with the smiling stock photos nobody in real life quite looks like. She kept all of that in a large black briefcase that lived in her office but came home the night before early flights so she could pack it into the suitcase without a detour. I found a calm voice inside me that afternoon, the kind that has to be pinned down with both hands. I cooked. I asked the children about their days. I laughed, even. When she came home, I spilled a dish of green beans. I helped with homework. I was, studiedly, methodically, ordinary. At dinner I said it lightly, so, another trip, then? Yes. She looked tired around the eyes. Same old. Not my favorite. You've been with the company a long time, I said. You could choose almost any desk, I think. She smiled sadly. Maybe soon. I want more experience first. She reached for my hand. I know it's hard on you. And the kids. We miss you, I said. I let the sentence sit there. Soft. Barefoot. After the plates were cleared, I put the dishwasher on, and we fell into the small rituals of a family evening, the ones you don't notice until they're missing. In the bedroom, she began to pack. In the kitchen, I wiped the counter again for no reason at all. Could you grab my suitcase from the garage? She asked. Sure. I went out, stopped by her car, looked in the back seat. No briefcase. Fine. The trunk, then. I took a breath. Walked back in with the suitcase so nothing about me would look like a man who had noticed anything he shouldn't. Where are the keys? I asked. I think the tire's losing air. I'll take it by Jerry's. She hesitated, something wary flickering in going out. Can't you use the spare? It's not urgent, I said with a grin. But we've got time. Better to fix it right. She handed me the keys. I kissed her temple. I walked to the garage as if it were any other night, as if I didn't feel the house tilt under my feet. Jerry has run the same service station since high school, the kind of place where the coffee is burnt but honest and the men call each other brother, without thinking about how and when the word becomes true. He opened the bay door. What's up, man? Tire needs a look, I said, then, lowering my voice, and I need 10 minutes with the trunk. He scanned my face. Trouble at home? I didn't answer with words. He nodded anyway. Take your time. I opened the trunk. The briefcase was there, black and solid, its handle smooth where hands had known it. I set it on the workbench. The lock clicked open with the combination I knew, because marriage is a long practice of sharing numbers. I didn't rummage. I didn't violate more than I already had. I traced the logic of pockets. Top lid, side sleeve, thin zippered pouch where a flat thing might hide. My fingers found a shape. A small box. Not jewelry. The pharmacy kind. Open. Inside, a few missing, the rest neat in their foil like little mercies. I counted what wasn't there. I didn't want to, but I did. I put them back exactly as I had found them. I closed the briefcase. I breathed through my mouth, and it didn't help. The world had a sterile scent, the way a dentist's office smells just before you know it's going to hurt. Jerry checked the pressure while I paid for gas I didn't really need and thanked him with my eyes. On the drive home, I filled her tank because it was a habit, because I didn't know if I would be doing it again. The garage door swallowed the car. I walked in through the mudroom where the kids' backpacks hung like small flags. I told Nora the tire had a nail, that Jerry patched it. I opened a beer and sat with the children, who argued about whether owls were nocturnal or just spooky. Half an hour later, she sat next to me on the couch. Closer than usual. "Are you ready for tonight?" she whispered against my ear, the way she does when she doesn't want to startle the kids. I sipped, held the bottle just under my lip as if that could hold back everything else. "I think so," I said. "My stomach's a little off." Concern creased her forehead. "It's been days. You should see someone." "I'll try something new," I said. "A friend recommended it." She kissed my cheek. "I love you." We put the kids to bed together. Her hand on Lily's hair. My hand on Daniel's shoulder. The little domestic benedictions we give one another without naming them. That night, our bodies moved together, but mine felt like a map someone else was reading aloud. She asked me again about my stomach. I nodded. I let the lie sit between us and call itself a kindness. At 5, she showered. I lay in the gray light and did not say our usual goodbye at the door. I didn't trust my face. She bent and kissed my cheek anyway. "Still not feeling well?" I nodded, and the nod seemed to pull the air out of the room. After she left, I showered until the mirror fogged and cleared and fogged again. I made breakfast I couldn't eat. I tied shoes with hands that didn't feel like mine. Then I found a private investigator. The yellow pages felt archaic in my hands, the yellow a little too cheerful for what I wanted. I called agencies until I found one with a branch in Denton, her destination. The man on the phone had a voice like a median, steady, meant to keep traffic flowing. He took down her name, the flight, the hotel. I added a photo, emailed while my hands shook. I told him to watch the evening. That was all. The day would be presentations and coffee in paper cups and fake smiles that hurt. The night would tell the truth. I paid the retainer. He said they would try for photographs. They could not promise, but they would try. In the afternoon, I met with a divorce lawyer. No fault state, she explained, her hair coiled into an uncompromising knot. No blame required. I was the primary caregiver, I would likely get custody. Nora would have visitation. We'd split property 50-50. Alimony not necessary with similar incomes, child support calculated by a table that looked like a Punnett square for heartache. The inheritance? Separate property. Untouchable. Fine. I didn't want it. I told the lawyer to file Monday, irreconcilable differences. I told her to have Nora served publicly at work. I told myself it was justice, and I recognized how closely it stood next to revenge and how often they borrowed each other's jackets. We agreed that the house would be sold when the kids turned 18 and that I would insist, that she vacate now. My priority was the children. My priority was also the small, dark room in me that wanted her to know what it felt like to be humiliated by a truth you could have prevented. I went home and waited for the day's end to hand me the night. She came back Friday. She wouldn't let me do the laundry. "I've got it," she said, bright as a coin. I smiled, wry, inward. Of course she did. She pressed me again about my stomach. I said the medicine was helping. She kissed me softly and told me she had missed me. Monday morning, after the kids climbed onto the school bus with their backpacks bumping like little turtles, the detective agency called. "We have a report," the manager said. "With photographs." I was in their office within half an hour, sitting on a chair that had seen a decade of other men's backs. The manager slid a stapled set of pages across the desk. He said he hadn't read every line. He didn't have to. Even from his quick scan, it looked incriminating. I read. The subject, Nora Hale. Surveillance began at 5:17 p.m., Wednesday, June 16, in the lobby of the Denton Marriott Hotel. Identification was confirmed by comparison to a photo provided by the Merville office. She wore a company badge. She carried a briefcase. She entered the elevator with a staff member present and was observed arriving at room 414 at 5:23 p.m. Exhibit 1A, a photograph of Nora in a professional outfit, just before entering the room. The picture was taken from a distance, likely a mobile phone. Her left hand was visible. The rings were visible, too. At 6:31 p.m., a signal from the stationed agent indicated that the subject had left her room. At 6:32, she exited the elevator and entered the lobby. Exhibit 1B, Nora in a small black cocktail dress with high heels. The necklace around her throat was mine, a 10th anniversary gift I had saved months for. What arrested the eye, however, was the absence of anything around the ring finger of her left hand. It wasn't just bare. It looked deliberate, like a decision that had buttoned its blouse and put on lipstick. The report detailed the rest with the calm of a ledger. She met a man in the restaurant. They sat in a booth. Exhibit 1D, a tight embrace. A kiss that looked like gravity had been doing push-ups for that moment alone. At 8:51 p.m., they left the restaurant, took the elevator, ascended to her floor. Exhibit 1E, Nora and the man entering room 414. Her face was a shade softer, wine or ease or both. He left at 11:13. The agents followed him to the parking lot and took down the license plate registered to a Michael B. Hart at 1424, Elia Drive, Denton. Married. 2 young children. The next night, the report said, a similar pattern, another man, another booth, another elevator ride, another door opened and closed. The report was signed by an investigator whose name I tried not to imagine as a person. I didn't want to picture his breakfast or his dog or the way he kissed his wife goodnight. I didn't want to humanize the hands that held the camera steady. It was easier to stare at the ink and pretend the world was made of paper. I paid. I asked for extra copies. They burned the photos to a CD. I slid everything into a folder and drove to the lawyer's office. File, I said. Serve her at work tomorrow. I gave the address. I watched the pen in the lawyer's hand move, and it felt like a small guillotine blade dropping onto the last thread of something I had believed was rope. That night, there was no lovemaking. There was an empty place on the mattress where my longing used to lie. She sensed something. I could see it, the way animals smell rain before clouds gather. She didn't ask. I didn't answer. It was a dance, not the one in the hotel. In the morning, she rose early for work. She asked for a hug. I gave a half embrace and stepped back. I have to go, she said. I love you. I said nothing. Not out loud. My silence was loud enough that even the walls could hear. The phone rang at 10:45 a.m. Her office showed on the caller ID. I answered, said nothing. On the other end, a breath, and a small voice that trembled. I'm sorry, Nora whispered. I kept the line open and let the stillness be the only answer. She hung up. She didn't come home that night. I took the kids to McDonald's. I watched them dip fries into ketchup with the seriousness of scientists. I told them a silly story about a dog who wanted to be a librarian. They laughed. They slept in the car on the way home. I carried Lily to bed and pulled the blankets up to Daniel's chin, and I stood in the doorway and stared at them the way a man at sea stares at the shoreline through fog, memorizing every jag. In the morning, Nora called again. "Can I come home and pack my things? Can we talk?" Guilt rose and fell and left me dry. "Come between 9 and noon, I said, when the kids are at school. As for talking, we'll do that in my lawyer's office after you sign, notarize, and return the papers." A quiet sob poured through the line and went thin. "Good," she said, and hung up. 6 months later, the divorce was final. I could make the next part short, but stories rarely are where pain is concerned. During those months, we moved through the legal choreography that assigns names to loss, petitioner, respondent, custody, visitation. We measured our lives in signatures and certified mail. We divided the furniture. We designed a holiday schedule like engineers designing a bridge neither of us wanted to cross but both of us had to use. A piece of gossip found me, as gossip always finds the person who least wants it. Nora had become pregnant during the affair. She had tried to hide it from the last lover. Contraception failed. She was near the edges of childbearing age and biology had won a small, brutal victory over everyone's plans. Even if I had never looked in that briefcase, even if I had ignored the jewelry store and the hotel report and the photographs that live under my eyelids like ghosts, the truth would have arrived anyway. I didn't confront her with that specific cruelty. I didn't have the appetite to. But I carried it with me like a stone in my pocket, smooth from the number of times my fingers closed around it. We met once more in my lawyer's office. She wept. She asked me to reconsider. She spoke of the children as if the word itself might open a door. "It's hard," she said, "not to have them whenever I want." "I know," I said. "But I can't unlearn what I've learned." She told me she had seen a psychologist. That she had been diagnosed with nymphomania. She said her impulses were under control now. She said it as though a diagnosis were an explanation, and an explanation were the same as repair. I didn't know what I felt, anger, yes, but also a sad sort of kindness, the kind that changes nothing but refuses to leave. I told her that even if she had better tools now, she had chosen to seek them too late, after the harm, after the lies had accumulated like snow on a roof you keep telling yourself won't collapse. We left. She cried in the elevator. I stared at the numbers above the door like they were counting down something besides floors. Later, a friend of mine who had gone to school with me and now worked the door at a nightclub called to say he'd seen her there on the weekends. Different men. The same dress. The same way of laughing too loudly when she didn't want to say what she felt. Another friend, hers, phoned to tell me she was in poor health, that she needed help, that she had contracted herpes. The words felt clinical and cruel at once, a sentence I didn't want to read in any language. I said I was sorry. I said I couldn't help. Both were true. I do not paint that refusal as virtue. Some days I wonder whether another shape of kindness was available to me and I simply lacked the courage to give it. Most days I hold the line I drew and tell myself that a wound has the right to close without two more fingers prodding it. I started dating after the papers were finalized. Her name is Elena. She is my age, her own divorce a clean, hard line under a husband who had betrayed her in a way that looked different but rang the same bell. She is strong in a way I didn't know I needed, a strength that doesn't announce itself but is there when the floor moves. The children like her. That is a sentence I didn't expect to write and that I now read like a prayer. I think about warning any future man Nora gets serious with. Sometimes the thought rises like bile, honesty as a weapon. Then the thought shrinks like a balloon losing air and I consider the possibility that it isn't my place to narrate another person's future. There is a sentence I come back to, in the quiet. It is not wise, not literary, not the kind of sentence you put on a card. It is simply true. We were, once, a picture I believed in. And then the picture was scratched, and then it was torn. You can tape a torn photo, but anyone who looks closely will always see the break. What remains are the living things, Daniel's laugh that still hiccups at the end, Lily's way of saying, remember, like it's a word that needs an extra syllable to hold everything, the dog who sleeps anywhere there is sunlight, the bills that ask to be paid, the dinners made, the friends who stand like trees you didn't know had grown so tall in your yard until the storm bent them and they didn't snap. And me. And my story. And the careful act of telling it without wounding something that is finally, slowly, knitting shut. But stories nest. One memory opens and another crawls out. The morning it all began, the phone, the unfamiliar code, the word, stolen, still visits, sometimes. I hear her voice. I hear my own. I hear how ordinary it all sounded at first, and how easy it is to mistake a crack for a hair for a shadow for nothing. So I go back, not to punish myself, but to make sure I'm not inventing the past. The towel on the oven handle was damp from a spill. Daniel had asked if 7 was, basically 8. Lily insisted her sweater made her run faster. The phone rang. I picked it up. The rest followed because once you lift a single thread, the sweater never quite looks the same. Do I regret calling the jewelry store? Do I regret opening the briefcase? Do I regret looking? There are days I wish I had let the sweater be, even snagged, the way you look at a favorite shirt and decide not to examine the stain too closely because you'd rather keep loving it. But there are other days, and they've grown more frequent, when I'm grateful to the version of me who believed that truth, however cruel, is less corrosive than a lie politely tended. There is a final image I cannot shake, the report snapshot of Nora in the lobby, the black dress, the bare finger, the necklace I bought reflecting the hotel's light. It isn't rage that grips me when I see it. It is a sort of museum calm, the knowledge that what I am looking at is a relic of a world that no longer exists, that once meant everything to its people, that has value still because it tells the truth about what we hoped for and what we broke. I imagine placing that photo behind glass. I imagine walking past it with my children someday in a gallery called, The Things We Survived, nodding to it the way you nod to a neighbor you no longer speak to but whose presence on the street is an undeniable fact of your shared map. We were here, the picture says. We were here. I did not go back to the investigator's office again. I didn't need more paper, more ink, more angles of the same hurt. What I needed was steadiness, and steadiness is rarely dramatic. It looks like groceries. It looks like a calendar with color-coded squares. It looks like the way your voice stays warm when your son forgets his lunch, the way your hands stay gentle when your daughter's braid won't cooperate and she's late and her eyes shine with frustrated tears. I began to think of healing as housekeeping. Each day I picked up what pain had scattered the day before, and each night I put away what anger had dragged into the middle of the floor. I told myself that dignities, small, private dignities, were as necessary as oxygen. I made the beds. I learned how to season a cast iron skillet properly. I returned library books on time. I spoke to the dog in full sentences because sometimes the sound of my own voice, unbroken by accusation or defense, felt like a rope across a river. With Nora, the choreography settled into an uneasy, workable shape. We exchanged messages about the children and only the children. We traded logistics the way business partners trade memos, brief, factual, no adjectives if we could help it. In those early months, I found I could be civil for the 10 minutes a week that civility was demanded, and then I could step back into my own house and exhale without tasting metal. Daniel asked simple questions that were not simple. Why can't mommy tuck me in every night? Because she has her own home now, I said softly, kneeling to meet his eyes, and because grown-ups sometimes make choices that change the shape of a family, but not its love. He thought about that, pursed his lips like a tiny professor, and said, okay. But on Fridays can we still have pancakes for dinner? I promised we could. We did. We do. Lily did not ask questions. She climbed into my lap when a cartoon made her laugh too hard. She brought me a purple crayon and said it was a magic wand that fixes sad air. She would fall asleep in the car and, in that weight of trust, I felt something in me knit. On a Thursday a few months after the papers were final, the doorbell rang. It was Elena, holding a plant I could not name and a smile that could have melted the old frost in a far older house than mine. "Peace, Lily," she said, reading my uncertainty. "It cleans the air. Also, I couldn't think what else to bring you for your new old home." I laughed because it was the first description of my life that made sense. New old. Yes. A house that had been rearranged in a storm and was now learning where to keep its light. We did not rush. We walked the long way in the park while the kids scootered and argued about who was the fastest. We learned each other's grocery preferences and tolerated the strange facts that come with choosing someone in your 40s, what keeps you up at night, which side of the bed feels like home, which month makes you loneliest and why. With her, the word ordinary became luminous. She had the kind of steadiness that lets silence be a room and not a test. We kissed like people who knew what kissing could and could not fix, and we kept kissing anyway because we had chosen comfort that didn't disguise itself as chaos. Nora noticed. When she came to the door for pickup and found Elena there, she offered a politeness that felt like a shawl put on for company. "Hello," she said, and then to me, "They have their backpacks." I handed her the bags, the lunch boxes, the permission slip for the field trip. We did not mention the past. We did not mention the report or the ring or the night in Denton that had unthreaded so many seams. After they drove off, Elena stood in the hallway, fingers lightly on the strap of her purse, and asked, very gently, "Are you okay?" "I am," I said, surprised to hear it and to feel it be true enough. "I am." Healing is not linear, people say, which is a polite way of saying some mornings you will still wake with stones in your chest. There were nights when the house blinked and I saw a ghost, Nora laughing in the kitchen, her wrist bent just so as she poured wine, her foot catching on the rug, my hand steadying her without thinking. There were mornings when I opened a drawer and found an old scarf, a receipt, a fountain pen I'd been sure I'd lost, and the small shock of it was a trapdoor under my feet. I learned to let the memory pass through and out, like weather. I learned not to set a table for it, not to invite it to dinner. I made one rule for myself and kept it. I would not teach our children to hate their mother. I would not soften truth when truth was asked for, but I would not season it with my hurt. I would not let my pain speak in their ears with my voice, because I have seen what bitterness does to a child's map of love. It erases entire countries and leaves deserts where there might have been gardens. So, on the days they came home with stories, we went to the lake, Mom let us make cupcakes and we used too much frosting and it was awesome. Her new place has a balcony and a lady downstairs with a cat who is mean but beautiful. I said, "That sounds fun," and meant it as best I could. When they came home quiet, I made cocoa and waited, and sometimes waiting was the best love I knew how to offer. The rumor about Nora's health reached me sideways, and I did what I had practiced. I told the truth that protected the children and kept the rest. When Lily asked why Mommy had a doctor appointment on a weekend, I said, "Because sometimes our bodies need care," and when Daniel said, "Do bodies get in trouble?" I said, "They get tired. They get sick. They get better. They need kindness the way we do." In this way we built a life, one honest sentence at a time. There is a corner of the closet where the wedding album lives. The first time I opened it after the divorce, it felt like stepping barefoot on glass. But the second time was gentler, and the third time gentler still, and by the fifth time I could look at the young man in the rented tuxedo and say, without flinching, he didn't know everything and that is not a crime. On the children's birthdays, Nora and I occupy the same space again, like planets that can share a sky if you draw the orbits carefully. We agree on the menu. We disagree on the number of balloons and let the kids decide. We sing, off-key and earnest. I cut the cake. She passes the plates. Elena ties the trash bag and pretends not to see the way old sadness lifts its face for air and then goes back to sleep. Once, after the guests had left and the kitchen was nearly restored to its usual dignity, Nora lingered by the doorway. "Thank you," she said, eyes on the floor, on the baseboard, on anything but me. "For what?" I asked, not unkindly. For not telling them a version of me I don't know how to live with," she said, and the sentence wobbled halfway between apology and gratitude. "You're their mother," I said. "They'll write their own version." She nodded. She swallowed. She left. Later, in bed, Elena traced a circle on my shoulder and said, "That was hard," and I said, "Yes," and then we were quiet a long time, and then she said, "You did well," and I let that sentence be a bandage I didn't know I needed. I don't keep the investigator's report in the house anymore. I took it to a storage unit where old furniture and older victories go to sleep. I slid it into a box labeled taxes and misc, and as I closed the lid I felt something unclench. It was not forgiveness. Forgiveness is a wild animal, and if you chase it, it will outrun you and make you look foolish. It was acceptance, its smaller, humbler cousin. It was the recognition that a fact can live without my daily permission. On a Sunday, months later, Daniel and Lily and I drove out to the state park to hike a trail that made a loop around a lake the color of tarnished coins. Halfway around, the sky let down a polite rain, the kind that does not soak you so much as remind you that you live under weather. The children spread their arms wide and laughed at the way the drops jeweled on their sleeves. "Do you think it rains on the other side of the world at the same time?" Daniel asked. "Sometimes," I said. "What about in the past?" Lily asked, because time is a place 5-year-olds visit as easily as the backyard. "It rained then too," I said. "People got wet. People dried off. They kept walking. We kept walking. By the time we reached the car, the rain had become a mist and the mist had become memory. I buckled them in, started the engine, and sat a moment, hands on the wheel, the gentle ache of a life doing its patient work inside my chest. I thought of the very first ring I bought, thin, modest, chosen not for carats but for what I could afford and what it meant. I thought of the way a jeweler's loupe turns a diamond into a planet. I thought of the jeweler on the phone, the kind voice that turned my world on its hinge and did not know it. I thought of Nora, of the black dress in the hotel lobby, of the way desire can make a person believe in a small, short-lived freedom so fiercely that every other oath goes quiet. I thought of Michael B. Hart and the way his name had become a footnote in a book he would never read aloud to his children. I thought of Elena, planting a peace lily in a pot by the window, her hair up, her hands dirty and happy, asking whether the light was too much, whether the plant would forgive us if we misjudged. Most of all, I thought of the two faces in the rearview mirror. Daniel making a face at himself just to see if it would stick. Lily combing the wet out of her bangs with her fingers, serious as a scientist. And I thought, this is enough. Not a consolation prize, not a dimmed version of a braver dream. Enough, the way bread is enough when you are hungry and someone who loves you puts it in your hand warm. When we pulled into the driveway, the porch light came on by itself, the timer doing what I had told it to do months ago. I took that as a benediction too. The future is not a promise. It is a schedule you can adjust. Inside, the dog circled 3 times and sighed like an old ant settling into a story. I made hot chocolate because we needed an ending and some endings should be sweet. We drank it at the table where so much had broken and been repaired, where so many ordinary decisions had accumulated into a life. "Can we watch a movie?" Daniel asked. "Can it be the one with the talking bear who wears a hat?" Lily asked, hope already halfway to celebration. "Yes," I said. "But showers first." Groans. Laughter. Towels. Pajamas. The particular chaos of bedtime, which is its own kind of liturgy. Later, when the house was quiet and the dog had chosen my feet for a pillow and the credits had rolled and the lights had been turned off, I stood at the back door and looked at the rectangle of the pool, dark and calm, holding the sky like a secret. I listened to the night say what night always says when you stand very still. You are here. You are here. If you ask me now whether I would do anything differently, I would tell you the truth I have earned. I would still answer the phone. I would still cancel the cards. I would still call the jeweler. I would still open the briefcase. I would still hire the investigator. I would still protect the children. I would still build a life out of what remained. And if you ask me whether I forgive Nora, I would say that forgiveness is not a door you walk through once. It is a field you cross every day, and some days you find the path, and some days you don't, and on the days you don't sit down in the grass and call yourself a failure. You keep walking. There are mornings in late autumn when the light hits the kitchen table just right and dust floats in the air like confetti from a parade I did not attend. On those mornings, I feel something like gratitude for the shape of my days: work, homework, dinner, bed, the small private festivals of enoughness. On those mornings, I tell the past thank you, not for the pain, not for the breaking, but for the proof that I am not made of glass. On a shelf by the door, there is a small bowl where we keep keys. Mine, Elena's, a spare for the neighbor checking the dog when we travel. Once, that bowl held another set, on a fob with a faded leather tag. The bowl does not miss them. Bowls do not miss things. They hold what you put in them. They let go when you take it out. I'm trying to be more like the bowl. To hold what comes. To release what goes. To remain, in my small usefulness, exactly what I am. And if, someday, my children ask me for the longer version, the version with the hotel and the dance and the phone call and the choice I made in a garage with a friend who called me brother without demanding a performance of my strength, I will tell them. Slowly. Honestly. With pauses, so they can breathe between the facts. I will tell them that love is not only a feeling but a craft, and that when you stop practicing the craft, your hands forget what to do. I will tell them that desire is not evil and loyalty is not a prison and that people are not math problems you can solve once and for all. I will tell them that grown-ups can break promises and still keep trying to be worthy of being loved by the people who depend on them. I will tell them that the most courageous thing a person can do with a broken heart is not to pretend it never broke, but to learn how to use it as a compass anyway. I will tell them that we were here. And that here, in the end, was enough.